Guys, I am back and I am so excited to do this rant today. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I feel like today is the day to talk about the U.S. soccer culture, or better yet, lack of a culture. So stay tuned. This is probably going to go into two parts, to be honest with you, because I think there's that much information and I might miss a thing or two. So if there's something that I miss, please feel free to share it with me so I can make sure I get back onto it. But I have a list of stuff I want to get through. So stay tuned, check this out, and let's get the conversation going. I think you're going to love this. All right, so I'm going to start the conversation this way. And I have been reading essentially FIFA's Youth Development Manual. And in this manual, it states that a footballer player, education is between the ages of 12 to 23 years old. So that right there, guys, is an 11-year process. 12 to 23 years old. Now, that doesn't even take into account the ages below that. Okay? But I want you to get the idea of what I'm talking about is a 10-plus year process. Wherever you start, the way FIFA looks at it is one side, where you start is another, because obviously there's development underneath of that. But they're saying to reach the professional level is a 12 to 23-year-old process. And that is because they touch up on things like training compensation. Now, I'm not worried about training compensation at this moment. I'm just talking about what they classify as the footballing education for players to reach the highest level. 12 to 23 years old, which is, again, 11-year process. So when we're talking about developing players at the highest level in our culture in the United States, it is a long process. It will not happen overnight. It won't happen tomorrow. It won't happen in a year. It is a 10-plus year process, and I want to make sure everybody understands that. I believe there are three main problems with our culture, the soccer culture in this country. The first is soccer is not a priority. There's 500 other things you could be doing. You could be playing American football. You could be playing Fortnite. You could be playing, what's that new game, Apex, whatever. There could be 500 other things that could take priority over what you want to achieve in soccer. So something else, soccer is not the priority. Number two is the lack of development at team training sessions. And I'm going to get to a specific point later, but I've already mentioned it in my pre-story, was that I've spoken to many parents who have said this year my child has not gotten better at their club practice. How is that possible? And I'm going to touch this later. The third thing is the lack of accessibility of fields. Now, what I mean is there's not a bunch of parks everywhere where kids can go out and just play. And I'll give you an example. When I was flying over Mexico City to go with the U.S. men's national futsal team, I counted 50 fields flying in from Mexico City. And guess what? They weren't just, football fields or whatever. They were soccer-specific fields from, say, 5v5 up to 11v11. And there were 50 of them. There were probably hundreds more that I couldn't see. Right? You go to France, you'll see fields everywhere. You can't walk like a mile without seeing a soccer field. So we're not promoting this type of culture if the kids aren't able to play the game. Right? And I've heard great stories of, say, in Atlanta, fields popping up everywhere, street soccer, things like that. We don't have that in 99% of the country. Those are our three problems. So like I said, right, soccer is not the priority. Kids can go play 500 other things, do 500 other things, whatever, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I just want us as a culture to understand, as a community, so to speak, or a nation, that unless that changes where soccer becomes the priority, we're not going to develop top talent to reach, and I mean the highest level of the sport, domestically, right? In this country, domestically, it won't happen. We won't have the next Messi or Ronaldo until those things start changing. Those three premises start changing, won't happen. And I promise you that. So we have to start, there needs to be more accessibility to fields, which would provide inclination for players to go play the game, go play soccer. Right now, one of the examples I'm going to give you, one of the best players I've ever trained, and he's older, and many of you guys know I talk about him a lot, and his name's Inti. And I speak about him a lot, but most of you don't know where he really developed in his youth. You guys you don't know. He played in the street. He's from Cuba. He moved here when he was 15 years old. That's when I met him, 15 years old, and we've trained ever since. But the point is, he grew up in the streets of Cuba playing soccer. That's where he developed. The street. Not anywhere else. The street. He played nonstop in the street for hours against. We don't have that here. So, that is a huge premise. That street, that grit. Because again, there's no referees, there's no rules. We don't have that here. So, that is a huge premise. That street, that grit. Because again, there's no referees, there's no rules, there's no coaches, there's no parents. You're on your own. Now, the other side of the coin is you need to have that internal motivation as a player to push yourself. Many players around the country don't have that internal motivation, but they want that instant gratification of being good at something. You know, I used to read stories of David Beckham going out and just practicing free kicks on end to get better. I watched a story that Real Friend had talked about that Ronaldo, when he first came into Manchester United, he wasn't great at shooting and finishing. And now look at him, he's one of the greatest goal scorers ever because he spent hours practicing. And for me on a personal level, one of the things that I used to practice all the time was serving a ball. Long passes, hitting a long floated pass, driven pass, or on the ground driven. I love passes like that personally. But I used to go out all the time and practice on my own. Or I'd call a couple friends and be like, hey, let's go out and pass a couple long passes or work on this or do this or whatever. Right? Not many kids have that. I used to go out and juggle all the time. Very, very few players have that internal motivation to improve. You have to have that. You have to have that internal motivation that even if you can't go play on the street, you can go out and find a wall, pass against the wall, or go out and play 1v1 or do whatever. And that will make a big difference in the long run. And again, that's part of the culture of dedicating yourself to the game, to getting better, to reach your goal versus saying, you know what, I'm going to get here instantly, the instant gratification process. So, and this is a big problem, obviously, but it's the point that I gave you number 2, the lack of development at club practices. So, I want to reference the example I gave earlier where I've talked to 20 plus parents. I remember going to France at 14 years old as the first ever American player on trial at Olympique Lyonnais. I remember going to Europe playing semi-pro in France. I remember playing the Coupe de France. I remember playing. Got me there because I was getting development at my club practice. Now, of course, I did some supplemental stuff, but being futsal and other things. But I was able to get a good environment at my club training to help push me to the next thing I'm going to play. Because I understand that soccer, to reach the next level or the highest level, is a 10-plus year development process that the kids that I work with are going to benefit longer term and have hopefully a realistic shot for the U.S. men's national futsal team. Those are things that I remember because they were significant milestones for me in the game. Not some trophy that I picked up at U10 or U11 or U12 or whatever. It's the end product. Again, and it could be because they don't know what the long term is. It could be because that they're not ready for the long, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, it's not about the long term development. It's about the short term game of, say, winning. Right? And I gave you that example of kickball. How you could say I sacrificed winning the tournament by not allowing my players to boot or clear or smash the ball, to clear the ball. I said, no, we're going to go in this way. This is the way that my family and I looked at it was the long-term game of it versus, hey, okay, we picked up these things. And you know what? I won a good amount when I was younger. I also lost a heck of a lot too. But look where it got me in the end. It's the process that getting into college or professional at the end of the day. How many of us are going to remember a U10 trophy or a U11 trophy or U12 trophy or whatever? But I'll tell you what, I remember going and playing college soccer. I want to put it to you this way and give it an honest reflection on this. I know plenty of players that have been rejected, so to speak, at whatever age group. And again, I was one of them. Because in U.S. soccer, we have a mindset of athletes, bigger, faster, stronger, versus developing soccer players. So what I'm referencing is I know plenty of players that have been rejected because they're too small. They didn't play this game because they weren't big enough, or they didn't fit the needs of being fast enough, or whatever. They weren't strong enough physically. You look at the best players in the world, most of them are small players. Tons of players are small. Look at the Man City team. De Bruyne, small. Silva, small. Aguero, small. Sterling, small. Sané, small. And they're arguably some of the best players in the world. You look at Barcelona. Rakitic, small. Iniesta, small. Suarez isn't big. Messi's not big. Mascherano wasn't big. Right? I mean, and I'm just giving you a couple of names to think about. One of my favorite players to watch right now, Verratti, small. So you don't have to be a big, fast, or strong player to play the game. Does it help? Of course. And I've mentioned that before, about athleticism and how it can help you. But if we don't get out of this stuck mindset of, I need a player to be big, fast, or strong, and I'm not playing Johnny because he's too small, we're done. It's over. Because again, that puts the premise of winning first. Say, oh, well, I can't play Johnny. He's not big enough. So you're saying that you're not going to put a kid in because he's too small, or he's not fast enough, or whatever, because he's physically not capable. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Paul Scholes, one of my favorite ever players. In fact, he's my favorite ever player. I read an article about him. At Manchester United for years, he could only play 20 minutes because physically he couldn't handle it. They never got rid of him. They kept him in the academy. And guess what? Once he was physically able to catch up, what does he do? Signs a professional contract, goes on to be one of the greatest Manchester United players ever, and in my opinion, the best player to play the game for what he could do with the ball. And there's a big issue of competitive soccer in general around the country, where there's so many different levels of it. Right? I mean, it's one of the most complicated processes. There's, okay, for example, here you have Division 1 through 4 in the league. Then there's the FPL league. Then there's the ECNL league. And then there's the DA. Most parents don't know what they're getting into and what level they're at. So, like, their kid could be playing competitive, for example, Division 3. They win every single game. Their child and their team, and they think they're superstars. But they don't understand that they're not playing at a high level. And there's a lot of people I talk to, they don't even know what the DA is or what the ECNL is or what. They don't know what competitive. There's no education on this. How are we going to get people into the right programs, the right levels? There's no education. So it's fundamental, one. But two, there's definitely an oversaturation of players playing competitive. And what I mean by that is because there's so many levels of it, it needs to be filled, right? So because there's Division 1 through 4, then there's a level above that, a level above that, a level above that, right? We're talking 7+ levels of soccer that needs to be filled. So you're going to have, for example, higher level kids at the DA and ECNL, a little bit of a drop off at FPL, and below that there's going to be bigger drop offs. But like, there's kids that maybe are competitive that shouldn't be competitive, but they're being put into these programs. And whether they're winning or losing, if they're winning, they're being told they're very good or they're superstars, and maybe they're only playing Division 3. Division 3. When I just told you that's now 6th on the chain of rankings. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, Division 1. When I say Division 1, the highest level. So, I mean, that is huge in this. Listen, I knew a club that had 11 teams in an age group. So think about that. That's essentially A through Z. Now, it's literally not A through Z, but you get my point. Why does this club have 11 teams in an age group? What's the point? Who does it benefit? And you really got to think about that to understand why. There's no point for a club to have 11 U11 teams if it's about development of players. This is why I'm so set on doing this project. It's because I'm tired of it, of the poor systematic issues that we have in this country, of the way things are run, the way things are done, the way development is handled, the way the process is handled. I'm going to step up and change that. So in the very near future, I'm going to be releasing my project and announcing it to everyone on what I'm doing and how it's going to change the way soccer is in Central Florida. At least I believe that it will. Because again, I'm going to do things for a 10+ year plan. Right? So the 10-year plan will help you reach the next step. So to give you ultimately a realistic shot of going to the next level, college or professional, whatever your goal is and how much work you want to put in to get there. Because so many people are looking for what's next. And I believe that it's time for someone, and I'm choosing to be that person, to step up and provide a feasible solution. Stay tuned.